One, two, three holes. Pre-World War II German drilling. This is 9 pounds of stuff crammed into a 2-pound box. Let's find out why the owner has me looking at it, because there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. And down the rabbit hole another time, boys and girls. My friend Eric over in Georgia picked this drilling up years ago, and he's been shooting it, hunting with it, because, well, Eric shoots and hunts. And he had noticed this crack here in this horn trigger guard. I've noticed a lot of fuzz. There we go. There's a crack that comes all the way across this trigger guard. Hey, could you fix this crack for me? And the gun at that moment when I saw it was still 25 feet across the room. And I said, pre-World War II box drilling, I'll bet you that the gun is loose in its bedding. Well, no, the trigger guard's crap. No, it's not just a trigger guard crack. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and move this thing, and I want you to watch just how much this stock moves relative to the action. Well, as I'm doing that, watch the crack right here. Watch what happens. That is why the trigger guard cracks. You can see the whole thing moving. The crack propagated right here from the hole where that screw goes through the horn and ran all the way around. Somebody has apparently attempted to glue this, but I'm not entirely positive. I'm going to get down there and find out. But why is this gun loose in the bedding, and why is every single one of these drillings loose? It broke the wood here, blew this wad of wood right here, and you can see where the crack is starting to propagate right up inside here. Now, we're not focused there because I don't want to be. I want to be focused right here. But all of that relative motion, look at that. It just blew a scab right off the bottom of that. You can see how dark the wood is. Oil has been infiltrating into this crack for some years. So this thing is very, very dark here. Oil's been getting up into it, and left unchecked, this stock will destroy itself. From the markings on this gun, which I'll show you later, we can pretty much tell that this gun was made sometime between 1912 and 1939. Well, thanks for pinning that down for us, Mark. It has a unique feature, though, that it's made out of aluminum. See, the magnet will stick right there, but it won't stick to the receiver out here. So it has an anodized aluminum receiver, which for me says about 1930, 1932. We'll take a look over this thing, but it's pre-World War II because it has proof marks on it that were never used again after 1939. So that's pretty much what I know about it. The trigger guard is made out of horn, so let's pop this off. The trigger guard is made out of horn here. Each one of these screws is engraved, so I'm trying to be very, very careful to not hose this up any worse than it's already been hosed up by 90 years of working on it. All right, so we'll put that out of the way. Fly in here and we'll grab this one. Now this screw, wow, look at that. So that screw, we have to be very, very careful that we're not losing the slot here. And you have to determine the axis that the screw is coming out through. Okay, there we go. So that's coming out that way. And we'll clear the trigger guard away. So now, the damage to the trigger guard we'll have to take a look at in a lot closer detail later on a lot different camera setup, but it almost looks like there's epoxy here. It's black on black, so it's very hard to see. It almost looks like there's an epoxy set up there. There we go, hang on. We're a long way away from that light. It don't want to stay there. Okay, so it looks like epoxy here. The crack goes all the way around. It radiates out from this screw hole. So the crack runs across this screw hole. So I still don't know what we're going to do here. It's horn. This entire trigger guard maybe weighs an ounce. It's horn and it's unobtainium, made by hand and very light. And it looks like they were really trying to save light when they did this. The root cause of what I think messed this gun up is that screw is going to be loose. I haven't been inside this gun yet, But right now you can see all that flex going on right there, and I've got this thing cranked down pretty hard so it ain't moving. So all that vertical motion, and I'm willing to bet you, let me get a little wider screwdriver here. I'm willing to bet you that if we got up on this and we tension this thing down a little bit tighter, look at that. Holy crap, we got what? 3/4 coming up on a full turn on this thing. We get down on it, really tighten this up. Look at that. Now it's moving the entire pad in the vise. The whole thing is moving as one unit. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so that screw we had to come down, but it doesn't match anymore. See, the head is standing proud on this side, and it's underneath on this side. So you can't just crank down on this because there's other things that are going on. Okay, I flipped it over here, and one of the things I want to see if we can see is that by cranking down on that, this screw head sticks up now high enough that it actually begins to interfere with taking the gun on a rifle. There's a little interference there. So you just can't crank down on a screw like that. But now we know that the reason why the bedding started to fail was that we broke torque on this screw. And why in 90 years could we ever imagine that this stock didn't shrink a little bit? That's what I'm thinking. It shrunk a little bit, but I mean, the bedding is tight now. Any motion that's happening is just because the vise is letting it move. But now I can move the whole thing as one piece and we don't have any relative motion here. So what we've done now is we found the root cause of why the gun is beating itself to death. We know we can just fix this up here. We can just fix it because we know why it was breaking. That will also stop the trigger guard break. Now the question becomes is how do we want to fix this? And I'd be willing to tell you, I know some guys that would just grind the top off the screw, leave that alone. But inside this action, as we're squeezing down on this greener safety's function might be affected. And how this particular control that works to set the rifle or shotgun, it's in shotgun in back, it's in rifle in front, might be affected. And I take all the engraving off the top of that screw, which I don't want to do. And there's a probably something sticking up in here that moves back and forth with this coming up off the trigger plate. So in a way, it's kind of like a Parker or an LC Smith. You do not get something for nothing. All the gazinnas must equal the gazaudas. So I'm gonna flip this back over. I can't take this thing apart with this camera sitting here. I'm gonna flip this thing back up and we're gonna pull this stock off and I'm gonna show you what a blivet looks like. We'll get that out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and take it apart with the action hanging off of the barrels, just to have a way to hang on to it. Because I'm going to tell you what we're going to find out is I'm going to predict that these two walls of wood are really, really thin, and there's really no way to correctly hang on to this thing. I'll come in. I don't think you can actually see the screwdriver grabbing this screw, but we're going to come in and undo that right there. Okay. Now this screw, we'll show this later on the uptight, it has kind of an oblong head to it because it was cut to the curvature of the gun. I'm not the first guy in here. Blue handle, please. I need to put a little more neck on that. Thank you, sir. Yeah, we're going to have to clean that up a little bit. Every one of these screw heads is engraved. There's no way to match the engraving. So we did a little bit of research on this thing. And the gun is made out of duraluminum. There's a couple of different German ways of pronouncing it. The gun's made out of aluminum with a little bit of copper and some manganese alloyed into it. And it's what we were making airplanes and Zeppelins and all kinds of stuff. It makes aluminum, it's still ductile, it just makes it stronger. Well, this gun was made out of Dural because if you'd have made this receiver out of solid steel, it would have weighed a ton. All right, I had to flip it over and take the barrels off it because if I remember right, the top is going to come off of the bottom here. So again, we're not going to hit anything. We're not going to pry anything. We're just going to put a little bit of, we're going to just put a little bit of smack load on that and then let everything work against itself. All right, here we go. The receiver drops off. And then there is an absolutely gollywalking amount of stuff going on up in here. This shiny spot right here has been compressed. You can actually see a step right here where all of this wood fiber has been compressed down into the hole. That step right there is the difference between the gun actually being tight and not being tight. It is conceivable over a 90-year period of time that that got smashed down. Let me flip this bad boy over and we'll take a look up on top here. Same deal. Now a lot of this is just Glock that's up in here because this gun hasn't been into for years. But you can see the same step right there where it's just compressed the end grain of the wood. So we don't have to acroglass up front for structural integrity. We're going to acroglass back here. Probably take a piloted center drill, kiss this off and make it rough wood again, and then inlet a brass washer right here to take up that space. And we'll know we got the thickness right when the screw goes to full torque and is still, it matches the outlines, the contours. So we'll back it up. We'll come in and measure it, and then we'll back it up a little bit with a brass washer here and acroglass that brass washer in place so that nothing moves around. Then we'll come up to the front. We'll set all this in one jump here. We'll come up to the front and we'll probably take a very, very small sliver of wood and glue it in right there, or just black acroglass and cover it up. Now here's the thing you see on a lot of drillings. This damage right here, and I'm leaving it in like this so you can actually see some depth to it. This damage is what happens as these two lobes split that apart. You'll see this damage on almost every one of these drillings you see. That damage is there, and that's how I knew the bedding had gone from across the room without my glasses on. I could see it because I understand that damage, where that comes from. And it's because the gun wants to fold up kind of like a Luger toggle. Under recoil, it kind of wants to go this way like this. So as it's doing it, especially when you're firing the shotgun barrels, you can see how it's smashing this wood up right here. It's lifting that. So in order to stop all that, that's a little bit, we'll just drill a pinhole in here, put a little bit of acroglass in here, check it all down, and then just very lightly steel wool all this over flat. This side hasn't gone yet. Well, wait a minute now. Let's get this in profile. It almost looks like it's standing up right here. Yeah, you can see we're starting to shove all that. So we're going to stop all of this, but we stop all of that up there by dealing with this back here. It's just like an 03 Springfield. 03 Springfields will climb out of their bedding and destroy everything back behind the tang. And you want to fix all of that, but those are just symptoms. You got to fix the causes first. Okay, here we have the upper receiver group. Lots of things going on in here. Lots of things going on. But you'll notice that none of the mainsprings, none of the hammers, none of the anything is in here. This is all just support equipment. Cocking bars here that come through in the barrels. We'll go ahead and push up and down here. We can do that. That's the cocking bar right there. The back ends of 3 firing pins. That's the port side shotgun barrel, starboard side shotgun barrel, and that's the rifle barrel. One of the complaints this gun has is light firing pin strikes on the rifle side. And I'm looking at all this damage here and I'm wondering whether or not we've got enough protrusion here. I'll check all that. I'll take a look and see what I've got. This is a pretty unique setup here that we're going to discover in a little bit. Flat springs everywhere. Oh my God, flat springs galore. Look at that. There's the top lever flat spring, and that thing is really kicking me. But it's got a cross bolt Greener style top on it. Let's get back in here. It's got a cross bolt Greener style top. So not only is the gun locking up down on the bottom, it's locking up here on the top. Really nice and tight. Just beautiful piece of hardware, but it's all aluminum. These particular plungers right here are the cocking indicators to tell you whether or not the starboard or the port shotgun barrel is cocked. And then we have this gizmo back here. This, when pushed forward, will lock in. And you see that pin engaging in the frame. That locks the rifle barrel into alignment, or locks the rifle hammer assembly into agreement. And then when it comes back, it takes it out. Now it's easy to move. It's not bumping it up and down on top of that screw right there, because it's not going to be projecting out anymore. And you can see that this has been rubbed shiny over 90 years of use, but has not rusted because this is aluminum, which is pretty impressive. This little tab gizmo right here, remember that that little tab is here? Because that little tab sticks out in between the locking piece. Give me a focus on that, brother. This little silver spot right there, that tab, when you select rifle, that tab is going to pop out and it's going to push on a push rod. And I'll show you how all that works in a little bit. But just remember that that little tab gizmo is up in there, because that's going to do something pretty cool up in front. Other than that, there's not a whole lot going on. This is pretty conventional shotgun, crossbow locking here, pretty conventional. That particular screw and its locking screw will liberate this cocking piece here. And there's one of those on each side. This thing is incredible, and it only weighs, this whole thing can't weigh 4 ounces. And that brings us to the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Here's the blivet. This is a lock plate mechanism that's got a lot of stuff going on it. So what have we got on this particular lock plate here? We've got a mainspring and a hammer, which is cocked, and I don't want to drop it because this is also aluminum and it'll bend the heck out of it. You've got another, this is the port side mainspring and hammer assembly right here. The sears for that sit here. That's the sear for the port shotgun barrel. And that's the sear for the starboard shotgun barrel. And we're going to go ahead and drop this and I'll show you what I'm talking about. That will push up on that and allow the hammer to come forward. In this particular case, we can push up on this. Now I'm relieving the tension off of it to make it easier to show you. But that'll push up on this and allow the port side shotgun to drop. And you ask yourself, well, where's the rifle? Well, the rifle's sitting here in the middle, and the rifle is a unique thing. The rifle, I gotta remember how the heck I want to explain this. The rifle has to be, it's really weird. You don't cock the hammer in this thing. You're actually cocking the spring. So there's the spring sitting down inside there. And let me think here. I got to get this right. Is this okay? So this is the lever that when you're pushing that part up on the top, it's shoving forward on this. So when you push forward on this, you see this mainspring right there? That mainspring is tensioning because we're lifting it. So when you deselect rifle, the rifle mainspring is not cocked. You can see the space in there, but when you push it forward and it locks up on a tang, that space disappears and that sucker is cocked and ready to go. Well, now that it's up here, its sear is now beholden to the right trigger. Let's see if we can get a good look at that there. When it's up there, its sear is now beholden, and when you trip it, it pops forward. So there's 3 separate sears in this thing, and it just depends. And I'm telling you what, I love you guys, but I am not taking this thing apart just so I can gratuitously show you what's going on up in here. If you don't, I could do it, and it doesn't save me anything. All right, one last thing to look at here. Let me get this light out of the way because it's glaring on me a little bit. Right there. Okay, this is a set trigger. This screw head right here sets how far down this lever comes. So now we're pulling this down, and you can see that this mammoth spring, and I mean this spring's got a little bit of butt to it. That screw holds this mammoth mainspring, and I mean it's big. So when you're pushing forward on this, you're tensioning that, and then it gets caught right there. So now when I push up, where this screw head is determines how that part gets pushed up. It's two separate pieces, and then bang, you don't have to touch it very hard. And when that pops up, now that'll also work on the right hand mainspring here. You can actually cock this, set this, and it'll lift that starboard spring, but I've got it all in a goofy alignment here. Let me think here. That's got to be back like that, and when that's back and you trip it, that'll drop. Follow? I slowed that down because I don't want to bend the frame right here. This is a complicated widget. Wow. I've made the decision that we're going to shim this here. So what we'll do is just very lightly remove just a little bit of this surface wood. There's a lot of this gray Glock all over the inside of this thing, and I'm here to tell you that it's an aluminum frame gun, and that's what you get when you put WD-40 on aluminum. It makes this waxy looking. Ugh. So all I'm doing is just getting down here. You can see how the color's starting to change. I'm just getting that smooth stuff off the top, just to give the Acroglass someplace to stick. All right, Acroglass is some great stuff, but you gotta not ask it to do things that it can't do. I get a lot of comments about all these space age adhesives and why do I run strengthening across the grain. I'll cover that later, but space age adhesives are great, and Acroglass is awesome if used within its limitations. There's one other thing. I'm going to make a camera move here while we're hot because I want to show you one other thing here. That little divot right there on the corner is right there. This little divot right here, I'm just going to give that a little bit of tooth, just a little bit like that. I'm going to cut a couple of just little scratches in it like that, and then leave it rough. Okay, so when we come back, we're going to have a little bit of Acroglass, and I've prepared a little bit of the black gel. And you would say, how come I haven't done a mold release and I haven't done a lot of, use the frame of the gun to use it as a mold? And I'll tell you the exact reason for that is that in order to do that correctly, I would have had to have disassembled that entire bottom plate for one little divot Acroglass. So what I'm going to do here is just leave this proud and then just file it back down when I'm all done. Let's see here if I got it. There we go, I got it now. All I'm trying to do is fill this in. Sometimes I swear this has more in common with dental work. Now, why not down here on the cheeks? I'm not going to put anything out here because, to be really honest, I'll have to mess with the finish, and I don't want to mess with the finish. This I'll be able to just run a file over a little bit more here. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker. This I'll just have to run a file over, and I'll be able to blend this quite well without messing up the finish on the entire gun. And we'll just file it down on the inside, and then that'll actually look about right. But the most important thing that this is going to do is stop the oil infiltration into the end grain. Okay, come back over to the washer. I prepared a washer, and I'm going to just use that brass washer right there to shim this wood up. And you go, well, how do you know how thick it's got to be? Well, we'll know when I put the gun back together again. If the screw doesn't come all the way back around, we'll just come in with a reamer and just kiss the top of this down a little bit until it absolutely fits. So that shouldn't be a problem. So all we do here is glob on some glue here. And I'm just going to put this big old wad up in here like this. Lob. And I don't care if it's down in the screw hole because I'm going to run a drill bit up through that and pop it out later. And then that way I'll know that the hole is correct. Now when I cut this, I left it a little bit fat in the back there because I wanted that washer to fill that up. And we'll just sit that in there like that. Grab a screwdriver here so I can get my pencil back, and we'll set that down on the glue, and we know it's pretty much centered up in a hole. It's close enough, and that's all we got to do there. and set that down. Now anything else that interferes, I'll just come back in with a chisel and clean it off later. No big deal. Once again, in order to set this down and use the action to delineate where all of this glue is supposed to go, if I use the action to do that, I have to take the action completely apart, put mold release on it. I'd have to take the action completely apart, put mold release on it, and set it down there. And to be really honest, I don't want to do that. I want to completely disassemble this trigger plate for a couple of spots of glass. There's one other thing I wanted to show you as we rotate through. That's the greener safety. And what that safety does is it rotates this cross bolt into the way of the sears, and I'll show you that when we get on the bottom plate. That rotates back and forth, and what that does is denies the sears. There are two flat surfaces right here and right here, and when that cross bolt rotates in, it denies the triggers the ability to lift. So that's a greener cross bolt safety, and the greener doll's head set up before to lock it. This gun's got a lot of WW Greener influence in it. I'm going to show you one other really cool thing on the barrel, and I'm going to show you why I told you to remember that little tab thingy up inside the receiver. So when the barrel is closed and we're locked up, there's a tab that sits down here, and as you push on this tab, it pushes on a rod which runs up underneath the rib, and then that rod pushes on a mechanism which pops this rear sight up like this. So when you select rifle, the rear sight pops into your way, and that's set up. Let me get in front of you here. Let me just get this screw out. What that is a little rack and pinion gizmo that sits in here, and this rack and pinion, when the push rod pushes on the back end of this just rotates that and it pops up. So this is a rack, and that's a one-tooth gear right there, and that'll pop up. That whole thing is driven, and I don't want to take it out, but there's a push rod right here that I don't know if we can see that moving. Yeah, we can. So there's a push rod right there that just gets released. The one other thing that's pretty neat about this is this poacher's front sight. You see this white bead right here? You can reach in with your finger and just swipe that down, and it disappears and it turns back into a rifle sight. This thing is just full of surprises. This is a view of the bottom metal. The makers of this gun got up 3 blocks of Durall in 1931 and were allowed to mess around with it and made a gun out of it. So that tells me this gun probably got made after 1932, and it had to have been made before 39. So now we got it nailed down to about 7 years. The Meffert company's trademark that they were using was Hubertus. Meffert goes all the way back to 1839. His sons took it over. Big gunsmith and house in Germany. This is the right shotgun barrel. We're looking at it from the bottom. Both shotgun barrels have identical marks on them. There is a single proof for export at 16 gauge. Now further on up, there's the black powder single proof mark further up the barrel, but that's just the quick and dirty, hey, it's not going to destroy itself if you shoot it. This is a nitro proof mark, and it also has nitro on it, which is just by plain observation. The rifle barrel has several key markings on it. The Crown over U, again, is the single export proof. There is a nitro proof mark on this barrel, but more carefully it says that it's a 7.8 by 57. This is a rimmed 8mm Mauser round. And the other beautiful thing about it that kind of puts it into the after 1932-33 is the nitro, the Crown over N, and then it has the Stahlmantelgeschoss, which is the steel jacketed projectile, is what STMG means. 13 grams works out to right around 200 grains. This particular gun, that's what I'm shooting in it. I'm shooting steel jacketed 323s. The necks aren't misforming, nothing's going on, it's just spitting them out. So that's what I get off of just the rudimentary reading of the proof marks. I'm guessing somewhere between 32, 39 is the back end of when any of these proof marks were used. And that's all I got to say about that. Well, while all that foolishness was going on, our Ecra glass set up. So you might wonder, as I had said earlier, why I didn't just form fit that. And what I was saying was is that I didn't want to strip that bottom plate. So we're going to bent the camera. We're going to very, very gently just get rid of this and try to not nick up any of the wood underneath it. You can hear how thin that side metal is. This is an incredibly sharp file that has never been used on metal. You really, once a file gets used on metal, you can't go back. So there we go. So I'm starting to shape it a little bit. So we're filling in that whole chip that was missing right there. Almost there. There we go. So that fills in that piece. Now I'm going to have to come back around and very, very gently, blue hammer, please. Get a hammer a little bit more butt here. Now I'm reaching around this camera in order to get in here. But I'm just very, very, very gently with an extremely sharp chisel. Going to start milling this off a little bit. This is kind of like building a house of cards from the top down. Because I got to be very careful I don't put any load on this glue joint. It'll just peel this thing right off. And get it off the wings here. Now you notice I didn't smear it. I never got the wood wet, so this is just going to peel off. It didn't have anything to adhere to. But when we toothed up that cut with the chisel, we gave it something to grab. Let me go back here now for the file. Some of this I'm going to have to get in front of you because I'm trying to reach around this camera. And I'm just trying to, right there. I'm trying to reach around this so that you can see what I'm doing, but there we go. That's almost there. And then this has to be trimmed. So you can see that line right there that I've made. And we'll trim this line down and we'll test fit it and see if it fits or not. And get up in there. There we go. So the action will just slide right over that. All we're shooting for here is the gun rack smell test. We don't really think we're going to get this to pass because it's only new once and the wood's broken. There we go. So now what we've done is replaced that missing chip with a block of acryglass. We'll come in with a little bit of steel wool and just kind of rub that down a little bit and we'll be good. So now we're going to go to the back and I'll shove the stock through a little bit and bring it up here. And let's see, hang on a minute, don't make a camera move yet, right there. All right, so there is that washer that we inlet. You can see the brass. And there's really not a whole lot of cleanup that has to be done in here. All we're gonna do is come in and take this little bit of swarf off the sidewall. And you see, since we didn't wet the wood or give it anything to tooth to, it just rolls right off. Once you learn how to command acryglass, you own this stuff. Okay, see, it's just peeling off where I don't want it, and it left that shim where I did. Now, if this shim is a little bit too thick, we'll come back in with a piloted counterboard and take a couple of thou at a time off until the screw rotates around into position. So having done that, I'm gonna have to shut this camera off now and climb back up on top of this thing where I can get my body, because I don't wanna have a chisel slip and damage all this. So give me a couple seconds here and then we're gonna cut back to me putting the gun back together again. So now I'm just cleaning the glue out of this hole. A little bit more. There we go. Yeah, a little bit more. Got it. Okay. Okay, so that's going to get all that out of that hole. and allow us to do this. All right, so now we're sitting up flush. You can see here, let me get around here and look at it. You can see where this wall had failed because as this thing came down below flush, there was proud wood and it just snapped it off. So now we're back up to flush here and all that because we put a 30 thousandths washer on it. So then the action, I have since cleaned and oiled this thing just because I had it apart because I might actually get lucky and not have to take this gun back apart again. Okay, let's do this. That goes in there, and that comes up underneath. And let's see if I'm gonna get lucky here. I am, oh, the cocking, oh, I know what happened. Okay, important safety tip. Cock the hammers before you put it back together again. Oh yeah, that felt great. Oops. Because in that way the cocking rods don't get hung up on the hammers, and that's what was hanging me up. Okay, there we go. So then we can tap this out. Plug that in there. Run that down. This is the wrong size screwdriver. I'm not going to put any torque on it. I'm just hanging on to it here. And then, because this is the right size screwdriver and it's still stuck in the head of that screw. That's how well we got it in there. Bring this down. There's this tendency to want to wedge this plate down and suck this thing down with the screws, and you don't want to do that. You want to just kind of milk it. There we go. That's tight there. One more screw here. Okay. Again, I'm just using this as a spinner doodle. I'm not putting any torque on it. I'm just bringing it around. And then I'll come back out here and grab the bigger driver that's correctly fit to the slot. Bring it around till it's tight. Okay. Now we can get going on this bad boy in the back. Okay. That's the correct size screwdriver for that. Go ahead and pull this. Now what we want to see is when this thing sucks down is where does the torque drag up on this screw. So now we're starting to drag some torque up. Starting to drag it up. It's drawn up tight. It should go around another half a turn and we're going to be right there. And nailed it. Nailed it. Look at that. Screw slot fore and aft. Flush presentation. And it's not sticking up above the hole. Stuck the landing on that one. So now we see the trigger guard lays flat. The action is absolutely tight. And we can put this forward and after trigger guard screw in. And we're golden. Okay. The glue that had gotten on this trigger guard, during one of the breaks in filming, I went in and very, very lightly scrubbed the glue off the outside of it and then polished this thing literally with 1200 grit sandpaper and my finger oil. And it polished out very well. So if you look at the trigger guard now, you can still see the crack. We're not trying to deny it, but why should I break someone's perfectly acceptable repair because he didn't tint the glue black? No, I don't think so. So the repair was well done. The trigger guard fits and nothing cracked. We'll just milk that back around over there. I thought it was a piece of rubber under here. There's actually a piece of leather. It's leather or some kind of animal skin. So I left that under there because it might have been there on purpose. So we're all done here. It's nice and clean. Nothing moves. This thing is rigid. Let's put the tubes on this pig and go shoot it. So we've got two 16 gauges over a rimmed 8 Mauser. Rimmed 8 Mauser in the bottom. Two 16s. Rifle is selected to off. Safety is off. So we've got to remember now, we're looking at a ship coming at us. So you Navy guys get this. When we're looking coming at, that's the starboard one. That's the port one. Select rifle, hit the set trigger. That's the rifle, and that is how that is done. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Still got 3 holes in the back end. Still got 3 holes in the front end. 10 fingers, sight in both eyes. Another successful day in paradise.